So we're going to tell our story.
Yeah, sure. Chestnut story.
Chestnut's turning 10 this month.
Yep.
So we've been partners since September of '03, and we started Corner Kitchen amid much hands-on work, and we were rocking and rolling. You and I were working every single day, pretty much.
We were pretty busy for years, years and years. And by 2012, I think we felt like we could branch out a little bit.
We used to get people that they'd see our apparent success and they would say, hey, we got this great building. Why don't you come look? And we even went to New York. I went to New York that one time to look at a building with the guy and said, oh, no.
We've had people from Charlotte, from Pompano Beach, Florida, from Atlanta, from Greenville, South Carolina, that thought, oh, you should just come there. I've got a perfect place for you.
And we never really did it, though. Well, remember we almost did that place in Folly Beach?
Yeah, that would have been worth it.
We actually should have done that.
Yep.
No regrets. So anyway, so 2012.
2012, one of our realtor friends had a building he wanted us to look at downtown in Asheville, and we went and looked at it, and it's a nice building. It's a restaurant now, but it wasn't really the kind of place we wanted to open it.
Well, they didn't have any hoods, which is hoods are the exhaust thing. Believe me, if you're in restaurants, the exhaust fan is the thing. So it didn't have any. So that the same guy said, oh, let's go look at this other joint, right?
Yes, and it was a restaurant. It was not our style. It was a sort of New Orleans purple and Mardi Gras colors. It had a basement that really wasn't being used.
We came in through the basement. We walked into this dark space that had like elliptical machines and bicycles and restaurant equipment that was not working anymore. And I was like, oh my God, this is our catering kitchen. And Kevin's like,
well, it was truly a basement.
Yeah.
And their office was down there. They didn't need it, so they didn't use it.
We saw that, and then the guy brought us up here, and it was like, wow, because they had plywood flooring in some places. And I mean, it was operating as a restaurant, but it wasn't operating in a restaurant that we would want to be part of. So we knew at that time that we had to do something radically different.
And this building was at a spot in old Asheville where nobody came here or went south on this street, really, because there was a parking lot over there across the street, and everybody went that way. So this is kind of a spot that had a checkered past in terms of restaurants.
So then when we came along, Kevin, actually, you're the one who found out that they were doing this hotel.
They were building this hotel, which was going to have a multi-floor city garage. They were going to have a bar and a restaurant. So it was kind of like everything came together at once. We figured maybe this was the time to try this building. Let's start a restaurant here. We've done that before.
I would say, oh, this is a great thing. Let's do this. And Kevin, on the other hand, would go, well, let's look at the numbers, or I don't know exactly how you'd react.
Well, eventually, by that point, I think we both were saying, hey, it looks great. Well, let's run the numbers. Let's do the budget.
Right.
And we did that, and it seemed to make sense. And then we talked to our friends.
And we started that process. But we should stop here because we're going to talk about the process. So, having decided that we were willing to go forward, we knew we couldn't do it alone. We had an employee, a guy named Josh Weeks, who is now a restaurateur in his own right. He's got Single Tree Heritage Kitchen up in Waynesville. Josh Weeks was one of the first sort of key players in our operation. First step is we made him general manager of Corner Kitchen, but we also brought him into the catering business. And one of the things that we realized is that we always had this catering side hustle going, which was really difficult, but we felt like it could be a good business. So we brought Josh into the catering business, and we planned for the basement of this building to be a catering operation. So anyway, so we knew we needed an architect. So we had an acquaintance, a guy named Jim Samsel, who was the founding visionary behind Samsel Architects. And if you know anything about Asheville, Samsel Architects does really, really, really nice work.
Mm-hmm. And we had 8,000 square feet to do something with. We could imagine a certain number of tables, but maybe not how they're laid out. If you'd seen it then, it's probably harder to imagine this beautiful restaurant coming out of that, with me and Joe drawing maybe the plans.
Right. So we got Jim. The old place had a different location on the bar. It was a completely different operation. They had televisions, they had entertainment. That's not in our wheelhouse. Yeah, it's not what we do. So Jim came in, and after long discussions, he made a floor plan that we really, really loved. Mm-hmm. And he was also able to make sense of what we were going to do in the catering kitchen, which is we now know as the commissary kitchen. That was amazing. So we got that much done, and then we realized, okay, who's going to build this thing?
We had a friend, Trey Greer, who owns Elm Construction, and they had made kind of a specialty business out of remodeling old buildings downtown into restaurants. So they had a real feel for, well, this is what we got to do. this is what we have to move. This is the wall we have to take out. And in our case, we put a wall in. They were great to work with.
The thing that I like about everybody, Josh Weeks, Jim Samsel, and Trey Greer, is for better or for worse, they got us.
Right.
They understood what we were after. And right before this whole process came about, Kevin and I both saw this film called Midnight in Paris. And the lighting and the feel of that particular thing, and they've got restaurant scenes in there, and it was this sort of golden glow to everything. The use of not Art Deco, but Art Nouveau in the featured locations in that film was just so beautiful. And we thought, hey, this would be really a nice theme to kind of like say, hey, let's approximate Art Nouveau. And Art Nouveau creates, if you think about it, it's these sort of natural lines combined with really strong geometric components that break up these sort of natural look. And it's very much human in nature kind of balance.
In the movie, when they go back in time, everything's golden.
Yeah.
There's this golden light.
And
to the
you can see his
restaurants, to the
face.
clubs,
And it's comforting.
And we felt like if we could get that feel in here, and if you come in right now, I'm looking around the room and there's golden and brown, yellow of a certain type, and it just feels like you can come sit down and enjoy yourself for an hour or two. And that's what we wanted, because you want people to walk in and go, oh, I want to be here.
Right.
But we moved the bar up front so that people could see it from the street. We wanted people to see activity. It has that look of, wow, there's something going on there.
Yeah.
Old accountant used to say, people should walk by and go, I want to be part of that. And he was right.
That's the story of our initial partnerships. All right, so we had to come up with a name.
We did this twice. At Corner Kitchen, we had a whole sheet with like 30 or 40 names on it, and we settled on the Corner Kitchen, which
Neither of us were very happy with.
No, and now it's become what the place is. It's
right.
Chestnut. I think we ended up with maybe a dozen names. Chestnut was one of them.
Well, first of all, we're both interested in preservation and in conservation. When I thought about chestnut, I thought, well, how many meanings does chestnut have? The American Indians used chestnuts. They actually would dry, grind, and use it for nutritional purposes, get them through the winter. It's a great color. My daughter Genevieve has chestnut-colored hair, and there's chestnut-colored horses, and we like that. And then, well, it's a tree that's almost extinct.
The American Chestnut Foundation is based in Asheville, and the chestnut tree, not to go too far down that path, used to be the dominant deciduous tree on the East Coast.
And the old thing about Prodigal Summer, Barbara Kingsolver's book, which had to do a lot with the chestnuts, and that was a particularly striking book for me.
Yeah.
The other thing is that Kevin and I tend to, we like to talk.
No.
That old chestnut is a thing. Like when somebody tells the same story over and over again, it's like, oh, that old chestnut.
Yeah.
So there's 4 distinct meanings to this word. And I thought, well, anything that has 4 distinct meanings just resonates with me.
Well, it means it resonates with people. They read the word and they think something, and none of them had what I would call a negative connotation.
Right. And then what we did was we said this name to several of our family members and friends. Kevin's son, Matthew Westmoreland, just started writing, and he came up with the logo, essentially.
Yeah, he was drawing the chestnut leaves and then a C, and he made it, the C was like the
stem.
the stem of the leaf.
Yeah.
And so that became part of the logo, and we have a friend that helps us with logos. And then we were working in here one day.
Yeah, this was 6 months in the making, by the way. So there's these windows up here. My son, Matthew, we both have sons named Matthew, and I were outside messing around with these window panes, which we've actually reused throughout the restaurant. And Jim Osland and Michelle Mitchell, who are married, great portrait painters in town. So they're just tripping along the road with their kids, and they're like, what are you guys doing? And we're like, oh, let me show you. So we brought them in, and of course, I started to talk and telling them everything about what we're doing. And they're like, we want to do a painting. And I'm like, okay. Because, these people's portraits are not inexpensive. And of course, we were on a budget.
We actually budgeted for it. It couldn't be a small picture. This is it, by the way. It's this picture of a fictional place in Leicester.
Over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a spot they saw in Leicester driving around one day, and they thought, well, we'll just create this chestnut in the foreground. And they actually signed it by carving their name into the tree.
Which is pretty cool.
Which is great.
And then this part over here was, they used to live in Northern California. For nostalgia's sake for them, they put this side was that and this side was this. And I think a really great piece of art. It's the only piece of art in the building that we own. And, it's one of those things that, once again, you look in the building and this is what you see. Mm-hmm. That was a really big affirmative for us, in our process of doing this. All right, so the downstairs kitchen, AKA the commissary.
When we first walked in, they had removed what was a stainless steel brewing tank that came from the basement up through the floor, and
Right.
it was pretty humongous.
So there was two of them actually. One was beneath the stairway going up to the second floor, and one came up through here. So when we arrived in the building, it was plywood flooring.
That was a remnant from when Oscar Wong had started Highland Brewing in this building.
He actually had the basement of both this building and
next
Barley's, which is one building north. I met Oscar in 2000, Kevin soon thereafter. He's just this great guy, and they started this brewing company, and by 2004, they were the second only to Budweiser in taps in Western North Carolina. And at this point, they're distributed nationwide. Yeah, so Oscar had this space down there, and I kind of knew about it. And that was another reason. So when we went in there, we said, okay, time to make something real for our catering company, and also a place where Chestnut can do prep work and bigger jobs. We also like to make things. So we installed a smoker, and we installed a big old tilt skillet. So in the smoker, we make our own Canadian bacon, we make our own smoked salmon, we make any number of different items. And then we also wanted to make our own demi-glace of veal, ice creams. So we had all this kind of stuff that we wanted to do, and we had this big space. So the first thing we did was we managed to install a huge hood system,
which goes out the basement wall, up the back side of the building, past our back wall and the big condo upstairs. It went past their windows, and we installed it, and the owner of the condo said, that can't be there. We had to take all that down with a crane, put it back up. At the end of the day, it wasn't a big deal.
and everything felt like a big deal back then.
Everything's expensive. I mean,
Yeah.
people that want to start a restaurant in an 8,000 square foot space, we can tell them how much that costs at some point if they'd like to know.
So Josh Weeks, Kevin Westmoreland, and Joe Scully went to town, created an LLC, and off we went. And we did that for about 6 years in that space.
It was a catering company that's kind of like we do our restaurants. The food was handcrafted. If you ate a wedding dinner from our catering company, it was as if somebody had cooked you a meal in a restaurant
kitchen.
And it wasn't just rubber chicken and things like that. It was delicious, kind of hard to do food. So we had a trailer that had a fryer and an oven and a stove, just so everybody knows. Catering's really hard. It's really hard. And I say that not being the person who went out on catering jobs. Joe went out on a lot of catering jobs because he can cook food.
And if you look at me, I'm only 35.
So we kept it for 6 years. We did, I think, a great job. I think we had really happy clients. It was wearing on both of us. And so we decided at one point that we didn't really mind not doing catering anymore.
So now we have
It
this
was
great
okay.
commissary kitchen. We have the ability to make what we want. We rent out some of the space to another caterer who we really like very much. It's been useful the whole time. And we still do all our own smoking and all our own demi-glace, and our lobster bisque is made in the basement there. And we make our own French fries down there.
We have a big keg cooler and beer cooler that's right under the bar that we built in there. We have a huge freezer right under where we're sitting now.
Yep.
We have this massive room the size of somebody's bedroom. It's a freezer. and it's been useful for all of us because that kitchen now supplies things to both restaurants.
If you're ever in and you want to see it, just let us know. Somebody will take you down there and you'll go, oh my, this is large. So that's the commissary kitchen.
Sure.
Look and feel of Chestnut. 2 W's, welcoming warmth.
Once we had Jim Samsel's drawing, then we had to have somebody manufacture all that stuff that was going to go in there, this bar and all the booths and the banquettes. And we'd never worked on that level. It was always tables and chairs. So we found a company called Furniture Specialties, which is out in Leicester. And they came in and talked about building these booths.
Furniture Specialties, the finishes on their product are world class.
This was literally a hand-built space with hand-built lamps, ironwork from a friend of ours as well.
Once we got that done, then we had to figure out, like colors. Jim Samsel connected us with Tracy Kearns, who is someone I knew through mutual friends. We went and visited her in the inner sanctum in her office, Alchemy Studios, and oh my gosh.
We sat down in her office. It's like the most wonderful sort of color-filled thing because she's working on jobs for a bunch of different people at once. And she had this board on the wall and it had some colors and textures and pieces of material. We were talking about what we wanted and I said, I like these colors right here. And she goes, that's good. because that's for you guys.
The cloth material. We have a dining room in the back here that has curtains that you can draw. All that stuff she already knew. And I got to tell you something. There was this providential feel to some of the stuff that happened to us. You know, the fact that we knew Jim Samsel, the fact that we met Trey, the fact that we had Josh, the fact that we went into Tracy's office and she like had us at hello kind of thing. To me, that was huge. And one of the things that I believe is that if the universe wants you to do something, all the obstacles, or many of them, will fall down as you move through the process. And that kept happening here. And that was the cool part.
Yeah, and you learn things. Like she would have a material there. And we would go, well, this feels either a little slick. And then we would talk to the furniture specialties folks, and they would go, well, that's good for so many rubs, I think was the word.
Right.
Like it's like 50,000 rubs, which means your butt rubbing on that material. And then it wears out at some point. So
Yeah.
we want the most butt rubs we can get.
That still looks good and feels good.
Looks good
Yeah.
and feels good. But that was really such a great experience for me to work with somebody to help us design something that came out like we wanted it to come out.
And then the next thing that happened is, so we had, you know, all this time, all this construction is happening in this space. There's a bunch of booths in the center of the restaurant. And at the time, it was simply just a 2x4 structure, a wall. It would look like a big, long capital I. I think you might have said, these are too short because your head's going to be above. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? So I started to doodle, like, well, what do we do here? And I started to look at this sort of patterning in the Art Nouveau sense, and I just drew a picture. And then we called Tina Council, who's another friend of ours, who's a maker in town who does ironwork. I said, hey, Tina, can you come down and look at this? She saw that and she's like, oh, okay, well, let me get you a drawing. And so she drew the entire thing, the barrier around the dining room in the back. You know, they did the thing with the booths. They set up these lamps that we now have in the middle of the restaurant. They just did it. And I said, hey, Kevin, what do you think of this? And he's like, oh, hell yeah. And we're just like, do it. And so Furniture Specialties brought all their stuff in. Tina's people came in and bink, 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 and they put it all in. And it was like a miracle.
The doors are custom made for this entrance. And she created the iron handles, twisted steel. She put these little laser etched chestnut logos on that plate. And it was just like this little touch when they brought it. I didn't know she was going to do that. So all these little things were just like, oh, this is what we wanted all along.
And every time we can say yes, we want to say yes. And it's great when the universe says yes back to us.
Joe and I both like old buildings. We both like recycling. And in this building, the windows above the entrance were leaded glass.
Yeah, they were prismatic glass that was designed to mitigate the fact that this is west facing and the afternoon sun comes in. They were broken down. So we took them out, we scrubbed them. I put them through the dishwasher at home a couple of times. We decided to repurpose as much as we could. And that's one of the first things that kind of got us on that kick.
They're incorporated throughout all the ironwork that exists now. We also made candle holders out of them.
That the waiters hated.
The waiters hated them, but I've got one in my house now that I use. The ironwork encapsulated the glass. So they were super amazing, but they were a little heavy for carrying them around every day.
We stopped using
We stopped doing that.
Another one that we did when we wanted to use some chestnut. And so I called Asheville Hardware and said, hey, do you know about any chestnut that's available? And he goes, there's a guy in North Georgia who's breaking down 2 old barns. You better call him today. So I called him and I said, hey, can we get this? And Kevin's like, oh, let me think about it overnight. So it was $6 a board foot. And we called back the next day and it was $7 a board foot. And I'm like, I hate to.
You better say yes soon, right?
Hate to rush you, but I don't like this trend. And Trey Greer with Elm Construction set up this planer in the middle of what is now this dining room that we're sitting in and just made these old pieces of wood absolutely beautiful and notched them and everything. You can see them on the host stand, behind the bar, on one wall in the dining room toward the back. And that was really a great bit of repurposing.
And we stained them. My son was here.
Yeah, that's right. Matthew and you and Amy and I.
We stained the chestnut so that it looked nice.
Yeah, it was really pretty. That was a fun experience.
Yeah, and it's all still here. Pretty beautiful. That wormy chestnut is hard to beat when you want to give it some character.
I wanted to have an open kitchen like Corner Kitchen, and both the architect, Kevin, and everyone we spoke to said no. So I'm like, and I wanted to do something with the back wall of the entire restaurant. And there was a place called Swananoa Cleaners, an old factory. Oh my gosh. And they had all this stuff in there. It was owned by the United Methodist Church. So I went and spoke to them. And they said, okay, you can go in. I saw these beautiful industrial windows, which I said, hey, can I take these out? And so Matthew Scully, Michael Schomper, and I went over there with a Sawzall. and cut the dang things out of the window.
I think that was one of those days I was like, I don't want to have anything to
Yeah,
do with
that was
this.
definitely crazy. And so we got those, and then we brought them here, and Trey Greer and his guys created this big cabinet in the back, and they put LED lights. And so we don't have an open kitchen, but we do have this sort of glowing kind of window unit in the back. The vestibule was very dark. I went back over there, cut another couple of windows out, and now it's this sort of airy, open vestibule. And it's got these really cool industrial windows that are really pretty.
They're part of Asheville history. Swan Mill Cleaners was around since middle of last century or before. And everybody that's an old Asheville person remembers them. So if you tell them the story, they go, oh, they've got that connection.
Oh, and the last thing we did for repurposing was there was a couple of doors that were in the basement of the old Swananoa Cleaners. It was sort of like butler's pantry type doors. There were two of them. I said, could I have these? They said, sure. Took them back to my house when I lived out at Hickory Nut Gap. And the kids and I refinished these darn things.
They had handles on them that are still on them from probably the 30s or 40s.
So what we did is we got two pieces of tempered glass, one frosted and one with a decal of an M and another with a decal of a W. And we mounted them in the doors. And those are our bathroom doors in this building right now. And they're really cool. So that kind of repurposing has really served us well. And we think it adds character to the building. The curse.
It was before anything was in the center, I think. It was still pretty open. And we were working in here every day. And one day some folks walked in.
And they said, hey, we're aware that this space has some bad juju. There's some bad things, spirits in this building. You know, I'm pretty open to stuff like that. And I said, well, what do you mean? And they said, well, you know, there's a lot of talk about, you know, haunted Asheville. So I said, what do you want to do about it? And they said, well, we'd like to clarify your space. So they came in and they did a ceremony, which was actually based in American Indian tradition. They smudged the place with lots of sage. I was instructed to put sandalwood chips around the perimeter of the entire area and downstairs. And they walked around and they clarified our space. And the interesting thing is that there were two spots in this building, both here and below us, where they went, whoa, okay, something weird is happening
here. So they spotted that.
Yes.
And then another separate couple came in and went to the same spot and were like, there's something here.
These folks were all about moving the spirit. This is two separate occurrences, completely unconnected, a week or so apart. And the second people came in and they're like, okay, so you guys have a problem here. You need to lift these spirits out of the building. You need to move these spirits. And so they had us literally walking around the room with the intention of moving the spirits.
At that point, you could walk from the front to the back without really
Hitting
going through a door or anything. It was
Right.
just open. So they had us go to the back wall. They said, do it like you're rolling up a carpet and roll it toward the front door and talk. And they had us talking to the spirit that was here or spirits that were here. There were several.
Yeah, there were a lot of people that were doing this with us.
Everybody was like, we're going to treat this with some seriousness
And
with respect. And so we did it, and we walked up all the way to the front door and out onto the sidewalk. We told the spirit it was okay for it to go.
We also did the thing where we lifted it. Yeah, they had us line up on four corners as if we were all carrying a sheet, and we literally pulled it and lifted it up so it could release through. So it had 2 points of exit if they wanted it. It was really cool. And if this space had something going on, we wanted to do something about it that was within our understanding or even without our understanding.
I think we felt like we didn't know everything. And sometimes we're not open to the feeling. You get a feeling that might not be positive, but you don't know why. And you just keep on walking. You don't think about it. I mean, frankly, we want to give ourselves the best chance
of success.
Have good juju in the building. And then
For opening night,
Todd Donatelli,
who's the rector
at the All Souls Episcopal Church.
Cathedral. And we also had Howard
Howard
Hanger,
Hanger.
and he was the pastor at Jubilee.
They both came, and we had friends and family, basically.
There was a lot of regular guests too.
Yeah.
So at the end of the night, around 9:30, Todd and Howard were like, come on, let's go, let's get the show on the road. I went to every single table, and Kevin too, and we said, hey, we're going to do a blessing. Would you want to be part of it? And not only were our friends and family willing, but the guests who happened to just be here having dinner said, yeah, absolutely. So we all made this big self-help circle around the center of the building. We all held hands. Todd and Howard Hanger did the blessing, and it was really wonderful, a wonderful way to open it.
So we had smudged and helped the spirits leave, and we'd had our friends from a couple of different churches come and help us bless the building. And then even after that, there were a lot of remaining things like matchbooks and different advertising things from the old business.
Yeah,
there was nothing wrong with them, but we felt like, okay, we really have to clear all old memories out of this building. So we got rid of all the stuff. And I think after that, it really felt different. We have a building that I think now feels very good. I'm comfortable eating here. I think most of our guests feel comfortable eating here, dining with us.
Absolutely.
And I think we did a pretty good job with a lot of people's help.
The words blessed and gratitude come to my mind, and the idea of us being able, one, to just be successful enough to keep the doors open and keep our employees engaged and relatively happy is huge. And so for that, I'm very grateful. And
Me too.
And I think we're pretty lucky guys.
Agreed.